Hi everybody, my name is Justin Harrison and I am your instructor for this class. And so what I'm going to do is spend a lot of time creating lectures about informal logic and uploading them, and hopefully you'll find that they're a good help in this class. I'm going to try and circumvent some problems that I've seen in the class and also give you more information about this field. And I just wanted to start out by saying that I love logic, and you should too. And so as you work through this class, I hope that you'll always remember this. Just always tell yourself, I love logic, I love logic, I love logic, even if you don't really love it. And you should always do that with any class that you take, especially the ones that you hate the most. You have to psychologically convince yourself that it's actually worth it. That it's worth the time, the effort, the hatred. Because if you psych yourself out, or if you think that it's not fun, or that it's not interesting, it's going to be that much harder to complete the class. Now, is this a form of lying to yourself? Yes. But it's a good form of lying to yourself. But I think in this class, pretty much everybody loves logic anyway. So you probably won't find yourself falling into that in this class. So let's just start from the beginning. Logic is all about arguments. Now, you're probably thinking, I know what an argument is. It's a shouting match. And one time I got in this argument with my neighbor, and then we called the cops because he was yelling at me, telling me that I need to clean up my lawn, and I was telling him that this is America and I can do what I want. But that's not an argument. Although there were a few elements in that example that I just gave of argumentation. So in logic, it's not a shouting match. It's not something that ends up in calling the police or throwing somebody outside or getting in a fight. Instead, an argument in logic is just a series of statements, a series of sentences that support a conclusion. So an argument is a list of true or false statements that support a conclusion. So an argument is a list of true or false statements that support a conclusion. The statements that support the conclusion are called premises. So an argument has to have two components in order to be an argument. The first component that an argument must have is that it has to have premises. Now, a premise is just a fancy word for a reason. Whenever you draw a conclusion on something, you ought to have a reason for that conclusion. So premises are the reasons that you have, that you hold for a specific conclusion. The second part of an argument is that conclusion itself. So as we are talking about informal logic maybe later in your life, if you take it someplace else, or if we develop that class, an argument is not a shouting match. An argument is just a list of reasons that you have for a specific conclusion. Now, your reasons should be sentences that are true or false, and your conclusion should be a sentence that's either true or false as well. But we'll talk about that later. But let's start from the beginning. An argument can be about anything. And we are surrounded by arguments in our own lives all the time. So for example, here's an argument. I'm voting for Stevens because he makes me happy. I'm voting for Stevens because he makes me happy. Now, this is an argument. Sorry for the mouth breathing and stuff. I've got a sinus infection. And you might be thinking, why is he telling us that? Shouldn't he just be giving us information But you shouldn't be thinking that way. I'm a human too. I'm a human. Weird. Okay, so anyway, this is an argument. I'm voting for Stevens because he makes me happy. Now, when thinking about arguments, we need to figure out what the premises are and what the conclusions are. Well, every argument is about an issue. There is an issue that's being discussed in every argument. And what is the issue here? Well, an issue can often be stated as a question. So here, the issue is, should I vote for Stevens? So the issue is, should I vote for Stevens? The answer to the question of the issue from the argument is usually the conclusion. So what is the answer for this person who's saying this? I'm voting for Stevens because he makes me happy. What is the answer to the issue, should I vote for Stevens? Correct. If you said that the person is voting for Stevens. So this person says, I'm voting for Stevens, so the answer is that the person's voting for Stevens. Now, if you just remember what I said, the answer to the issue is often the conclusion of the argument. And so here, the conclusion of our argument is that I am voting for Stevens. So we're putting that in blue. I'm not sure if that's going to show up well on the video, but this is the conclusion. So we'll call that the C. The conclusion. I'm voting for Stevens. Now, whatever the answer to the issue is your conclusion. The premises are the reasons why that you're holding your conclusion. So what is the reason why this person is voting for Stevens in this example? Well, the reason why is he makes me happy. So here in red is our reason. Now, we might have multiple reasons for holding a position. We might have 20 reasons, and the reasons themselves can support each other and be conclusions of arguments and propositions. So in this case, I'm voting for Stevens because he makes me happy. If we were to break this down into conclusions and premises, we see here that the conclusion is I'm voting for Stevens, and the premise is, or the reason, he makes me happy. Now, this word because is interesting. Because, okay, the word because is interesting because it is a premise indicator word. So when you see the word because, I want you to think premise. Or again, another name for the premise is the reason that you believe something to be true, or the reason that supports your conclusion. So when you see the word because, often what follows the word because is a premise. So we can look out for these premise indicator words and conclusion indicator words. Another premise indicator word is since. So usually what follows the word since is a premise. Another premise indicator is for the reason that one's pretty easy to see, but just the word for often indicates a premise. Can you guys think of any conclusion indicator words? What are some conclusion indicators? The most famous probably is therefore. So we have premise indicator words. In this argument, we don't have a conclusion indicator word. Our conclusion is just stated directly here. But arguments do have conclusion indicator words. So one of the conclusion indicator words is therefore. This is probably the easiest one to see and the most commonly used. Therefore, ... Whatever follows therefore will be a conclusion. Or it follows that is another example. It follows that whatever follows that is often a conclusion of an argument. So that's just a little intro to the premise indicators and the conclusion indicators. But keep that in the back of your mind as you're trying to figure out the structures of arguments. Let's try another one. Since all dogs are mammals, all mammals must be dogs. Since all dogs are mammals, all mammals must be dogs. Sorry about that. All right. Now this is a kind of a tricky one. Since all dogs are mammals, all mammals must be dogs. Now, I just told you about the word since. And hopefully you remember that the word since is what kind of indicator? Is it a premise indicator or a conclusion indicator? If you said premise, you're correct. If you said conclusion, you're incorrect. Okay, so since all dogs are mammals, all mammals must be dogs. Well, what follows a premise indicator is often the premise. So in this case, our premise is all dogs are mammals. That means that our conclusion is the other proposition in the sentence, which is all mammals must be dogs. So this is our premise, all dogs are mammals. And our conclusion then in this argument is all mammals are dogs. Another way to say must be is are. If you are something, then you must be that thing. Let's not talk about free will right now. Okay. So, all dogs are mammals, therefore all mammals are dogs. Now what we've done here is we found the premise and we found the conclusion. Now some of you in your head are probably thinking something. What is that thing that you're thinking? Well, you're thinking that this is a pretty bad argument, right? Because it's not the case that all mammals are dogs. It is the case that all dogs are mammals, but not all mammals are dogs. Well, it's okay to have a bad argument, right? What we do in logic is we analyze arguments. We don't care too much about evaluating whether or not they're true or not. That'll come later in life when we're actually interacting with other people. Right now, we're just focusing on the argument itself. Now, if somebody said this argument to you, and now that you've seen this example, you know that this argument is not a good argument. And the reason why is because the conclusion is not true in this case. Now, this looks like this is a pretty simple example, but if somebody were to say, well, all women are people who should, be silent in church or something. Therefore, all the people that have to be silent in church have to be women. That's like a little bit different example where it's like not quite as clear. Now, of course, I don't believe that all women should be silent in church, and I don't believe that you should believe that either. But I just use that example because that might be an argument that you hear from somebody else telling you that. But in your mind, you can say, well, that's an invalid argument, right? That's not a logically coherent argument. Let's just say that right now. So if we were to actually, and there are different ways in logic that you can analyze things. And there are these really fun things called Venn diagrams that we're not really going to get into in this course, and they're not really fun for most people. But remember, I love logic, right? If we were to say all dogs are mammals, if we think about this circle as being all the mammals in the world, then how would all dogs are mammals fit into this if we were going to create a circle of dogs? Well, the circle of dogs would be inside the circle of mammals. So all of the dogs are mammals in this instance. Now, notice the conclusion says all mammals must be dogs. Well, in that case, all the mammals have to be inside the dog circle. So if these are all the dogs, then the mammals must be dogs. And now here's where we see the problem with this argument. It is true that all dogs fall within the mammal circle. However, we know that there are other mammals apart from dogs. For example, there are cats. There are dolphins. There are echidnas. There are, what else? What's another? Rats, right? So all of these things, oh yeah, and there are humans. You and me standing here questioning our existence. Why do I exist? The rats are just eating food, they're happy, whatever. But we're the strange animal, right? We're the strange mammal. The one that can't deal with itself. So we know that in the mammal circle, there are numerous categories. Now in the dog circle, we can't place all the mammals in there. Really, if we place all the mammals here, we see that's not a possibility based on the way that we quantify mammals and dogs. So notice when you say that all something are something else, here's another, we can go even further with this. So we could show here using these little modified circle diagrams the improper nature of this argument, or at least of the proposition. We can show that it's not true. But whenever you have the statement all S are P, where S is the first category and P is the second category, and we can plug anything in here, right? All dogs are mammals, all dogs are cats, all walls are parts of buildings, all stormtroopers are people, right? You can plug in anything you want. But whenever you have this, what this statement is actually saying is that all the S's are part of a group of P's. So you don't put the P inside the S here when it's in this format. Whatever comes first is a smaller group of the P's. Another way to say that all S's are P's is if something is an S, then it's a P. If something's an S, then it's a P. So all S's are P's. An equivalent way of saying that is if something's an S, then it's a P. Let's look back at this example. All dogs are mammals. If something is a dog, then it must be a mammal. All mammals are dogs. If something is a mammal, then it must be a dog. Now again, remember, propositions are either true or false statements. So the things that we use in our arguments have to be true or false sentences. If they're false sentences, that's okay. It's still an argument. And a lot of people give really bad arguments, full of false premises or that contain false conclusions. But that's okay. It's not okay for the people that hold those positions, but it's okay for us, because all we're doing is examining structure. So when you start, what I want you to do after watching this video is I want you to start thinking about arguments. You'll see them everywhere in your life. For example, maybe you guys have seen the extremely sexist Axe body spray commercials, right? And in an Axe body spray commercial, there might not be an argument per se in terms of actual written language arguments, but what happens is there's like this guy, right? And he's like, hey, and he sprays Axe body spray on himself, and then like a bunch of women come, right? So first of all, we're assuming that everybody's heterosexual, right? We're assuming that men want to be surrounded by women, and that's why, and then it portrays women as being like these creatures who smell something, and then they're like extremely sexual and all these other things, which is why it's a sexist commercial. Do we care? Well, as philosophers we do, but as consumers, people don't seem to care at all, right? They don't really make a big deal about these things. But anyway, apart from that critique, so the guy sprays Axe on himself and he's like, hey, and then women come and he's like, oh my gosh, I'm surrounded by so many women. My life is amazing, right? Well, what that commercial is saying is, if you wear Axe, You will be popular with women. Now, it would be better here to say you will be popular with someone that you want to find you sexually attractive, but I didn't want to write all that out. Okay, so if you wear Axe, you'll be popular with women. So the consumer sees the commercial, and then what do they logically do, right? Well, I'm going to go wear Axe, right? So this is premise 1. If you wear Axe, you'll be popular with women. Well, premise 2 is I'm going to go buy some Axe. Now, this is a valid deductive argument form, we're getting to it, called modus ponens. Modus ponens just in Latin means way of affirmation. So what we're going to do here is we're saying if this, then that, and then we're affirming the first part, right? So if I believe that if I wear Axe and I'm going to be popular with women, and then I affirm that I'm going to go wear Axe, I go to buy it, right? Then what is the logical conclusion here for this argument? If you wear Axe, you'll be popular with women. I'm going to buy Axe. What's the conclusion? You got it. If you said this, I will be popular with women. Okay, now why am I giving you this example? And remember, this is a valid deductive argument form called modus ponens. And we'll get to that way down the road. But it's good to introduce it right now. So you can just remember this as modus ponens, way of affirmation. If P, then Q. P, therefore Q. This is a valid form. And we'll talk about what validity means. It does not mean true in logic. But anyway, the reason why I'm giving you this example is because we are all surrounded by arguments. Everybody is trying to get us to believe different things about our lives. At work, our bosses are trying to get us to do things that they want us to do by presenting arguments, sometimes not even presenting arguments, sometimes telling us what to do, sometimes threatening us, which would be appeal to force, which is an invalid argument, informal logical fallacy. Again, we'll get to that later. If somebody forces you to do something because they have power over you, it's not a good argument. It's not a good induction or deduction that they're making there. Okay, so I'm giving you this example again. I want you to start thinking about your life, and I want you to start thinking about everything that you see. What is the argument that's happening here? Think of all SRP. Think of if this, then that. What are they trying to get me to believe? It's not the case, right? That if you wear Axe, you're going to be popular with people that you want to find you attractive. It's not the case. So why does the Axe company keep spending millions of dollars on creating these commercials? Well, the reason why is because it's working for them. So people are literally believing that this is the case. Now they might think, well, I like the way that Axe smells. But there are a lot more pleasant smells that exist out there that you could be wearing if you really want to wear a nice scent. You know, I'd spend a little bit more money and get a nicer cologne. It's going to be better than that. You know, it's like, I smell like a forest. But anyway, it's working for them. So application, right? Positive application of these things in our own lives. How does this affect me? Well, it affects me because if I believe the arguments that marketers are presenting to me, if I believe invalid or unsound arguments that others are presenting to me, then I'm deceived. And I'm going to make decisions that aren't the best decisions for my life. And so always think about these things in work, in your family. Think about when you do them to the people that you care about, right? When we start to logically manipulate those that we care about in our own lives to get what we want. That, first of all, we shouldn't be treating anyone that way, especially the people that we love, right? And secondly, there's a way that we can open up a whole better form of existence for ourselves. We can make better decisions. We can treat other people with the care and the respect that they deserve. And we can begin to start to control our minds and control our emotions. So if I see an image of a bunch of people that I find attractive, coming to someone who has this product, I need to separate, my sexual, instinctual desires from my mind. Now, death, sex, they sell, right? That's why they show us these visual images. That's why you see people, Calvin Klein and oily bodies with tiny underwear and all these things. They know that if they just show you an image, that's all they really need to do. And we'll talk a little bit in the future about images and whether they're arguments or how they can be used as arguments. But anyway, practical application, start to think about the arguments that you see in your own life. Start to think about the ways that you might be able to break those arguments down. If your kid says to you, Mom, I don't need to do my homework tonight, I can do it in the morning, right? Well, then think about that. What is your son or daughter's conclusion? I don't need to do my homework. And what is the reason they're providing you? What is the premise? Well, I can do it in the morning. Because I can do my homework in the morning, therefore I don't need to do it tonight. And then you can break that all down for them like I did here. And you can be like, look, premise, conclusion, right? And then they'll just be like, what's going on? Like, can you just listen to what I said? And you're like, no, this is important, right? And you can kind of like fool them into believing what you want them to believe. No, you wouldn't want to do that, but then you could present your own reasons, right? You could teach your kids this stuff, and you should. The best way to learn something is to teach it. Teach your kids this stuff. Utilize what you're learning to teach others, to help others. If somebody gives you a bad argument, if it's your boss, don't say anything. Just say, great, yeah, that's Sharon, I'll get right on that. No problem. That was great. What you said was amazing. But if it's somebody that that you have a more informal relationship with, then practice there too. So anyway, that's lesson 1. That's it. So I will see you soon in lesson 2. Bye.